What exactly does a bodybuilder do on stage? Have you ever asked yourself how bodybuilders are actually judged? I mean, they're all so massive, and if it's technically an art show, isn't it all subjective anyway? If you're like me, then you've certainly asked these questions before. In this video, I hope to clear up some of those questions by giving you exactly what a judge looks for when a bodybuilder steps on stage. First up, we have the core of what makes the perfect physique, which can simply be divided into 4 categories: muscle mass, conditioning, symmetry, and proportions. I've actually covered each of these in a lot more detail in another video that I'll link down below. In this video, I want to focus in on what a bodybuilder actually does on stage. What is it exactly that they do to show off their muscle mass, conditioning, and so on? The short answer is they go through mandatory poses both individually and in groups. These poses consist of the quarter turns, or the 4 relaxed poses from each side, and funny enough, these relaxed poses are anything but relaxed. And they'll also go through the 8 compulsory poses that show off each major section of the body in terms of muscle mass. They'll also perform their own individual posing routines, one that they've developed to show off their strengths and usually to their own music. Some bodybuilders take this routine very seriously and create beautiful works of art. Others essentially just go through the motions. So this is the broad overview, but what exactly are the poses that they perform? Well, like I said, you have the 4 relaxed poses, which are from the front, right side, back, and left side. In these poses, the bodybuilder would typically ground themselves onto the stage with a slight bend in the knees, flexing their quads for a wider illusion of the legs. This also helps their waist look smaller. From there, they will tighten their abs and flare out their lats. They puff their chest out and relax their arms, but not really, because they're still tensing their delts and showing off their shoulder caps. They essentially do this same thing on all 4 sides with some slight variations. From here we go into the 8 compulsory poses, starting with the front double biceps pose. This is a great pose to show off the guns and the V-taper. I love when bodybuilders perform this pose with a vacuum. It's one of the most aesthetically pleasing poses there is in my opinion. Another slight variation is having a bit of a tilt, which is something that Mr. Olympia Sean Roden was known for. It gave it just a little more of an artistic flow. The second pose is the front lat spread. With this pose, the judges are looking for those back muscles, the latissimus dorsi or lats, to really pop. From here, the competitors will go into a side chest pose. This is one that shows off the thickness of the chest and probably most famously performed by Arnold, as he had one of the best chests in bodybuilding history. However, he did have some weaknesses, although he would never admit it.
It's perfect already. Oh yeah, it's down to a point. Wait when you see it.
Like his biceps overshadowed his triceps in many ways, which leads us to our next pose, the side triceps. What's interesting in bodybuilding is that these competitors know their physiques better than anyone, and when they know they have a weakness, sometimes they'll try to hide it by showing off a strength. This is actually what Arnold did with his unconventional side triceps pose. Typically, a bodybuilder will stand sideways with the leg closest to the judges slightly bent. Then they'll push the same side tricep down into a locked out position, or even grab it from behind with the other hand. This shows off that horseshoe-like shape to the muscle. In Arnold's case, he would often perform variations of this pose that showed off his biceps a bit more as a kind of distraction, if you will. Up next, competitors will transition into a back double biceps pose. With this one, judges look at the overall shape and conditioning of the competitor's back, as well as the biceps peak. The glutes and hamstrings are very important factors in this pose as well. This is the one that can make or break competitors in terms of conditioning. With these back poses, if the judges aren't seeing that Christmas tree in the lower back, striations in the glutes, and good delt and hamstring separation, then this pose could be bad news for the bodybuilder. The next back pose is the rear lat spread. This really shows off the width and depth of the back muscles. Side note, these may be a little out of order depending on the competition, but this is the typical order, except usually right after the back shots, they'll turn around and go into the side triceps, which we spoke about earlier. I simply put it there just for the Arnold transition in this video. However, after that, they do go into these last 2 poses, starting with the abs and thighs pose. In this pose, competitors will clasp their hands behind their head and crunch down, flexing their abs, all while placing one foot in front of the other and flexing the quad. Some competitors also opt in for a vacuum pose here as well. Another side note, if you've never tried a vacuum pose before, I encourage you to give it a shot. It's so much harder than you would think it would be. Now, moving on to the last pose, we have perhaps the most famous one in terms of showing off your muscles, and that is appropriately named the most muscular pose. With this, bodybuilders will either perform the traditional version or crab pose, where they just flex everything as hard as they can with their hands down in front of them, or they'll place one or both hands on their side and flex down from there. Like I mentioned before, with all these poses, competitors can adjust them slightly to show off their strengths, but they're not allowed to totally change the pose. I hope this brings you some clarity as to what exactly a bodybuilder does on stage and what the judges are looking for. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And let me know your favorite bodybuilding pose in the comments down below.